Hi, Pastor Nathan Decker with your hashtag Better Together devotion for today. And this week I'm talking about the book of Judges and several of the heroes out of that book. And there's places within the book of Judges that have such unique voices that we don't recognize often enough. So, for much of the Old Testament world and New Testament world, for all that matter, for much of ancient world, women were not viewed as being very as equal at all with man. In fact, my Old Testament professor once said, and I quote, that women in the Old Testament world were viewed as animated baby making baby carriages. That's what they were. That was their purpose, their intent. But here in the scriptures today, as we share, we find that God likes to flip what's perceived weakness, going off of what I said yesterday, into a strength. And Deborah is the story. So Deborah is the prophet of Israel at this time. The Israelites have been conquered. Caesarea is a really nasty general who's waging war and combating against them. And Deborah is sitting underneath a tree, and she is speaking on God's behalf. She's considered a prophet. So, for all of those who think that women can't preach, let me point this out, that the word prophet is also able to be translated as preacher, because the word prophet simply means one who is speaking on God's behalf. It has very little to do with fortune telling or future saying. It has much more to say what God desires to be heard in the world. And so Deborah is an example of a female preacher, a female voice in the Old Testament, way back in the Old Testament, right in the promised land. And Deborah, a general comes and consults with Deborah, and she begins saying, well, we're going to win. Don't worry. God has said this is what's going to happen. We're going to do it. And this is how we're going to do it. This is what God has said. The Lord has spoken. And the general gets all nervous and says, Deborah, can you hold my hand while we do this? Can you lead the troops? Because I can't do it without you. And so she does. Fun part about this story that's also about the idea of what some have called the feminine mystique, the rising up of women's voices and women's places. That mean, evil General Caesarea, he's told that a man's not going to be able to kill him. Didn't say anything about a woman killing him, and he, in the midst of the battle, goes and hides in a tent, takes a nap. There's a woman in the tent, and he says, make sure nobody comes in here, and say that there's nobody here. And so she does that. But while he's sleeping, she takes a tent post or tent peg and drives it through his head, killing him. There's a lot of women in this particular story that are strong characters. They're major players in this story. In fact, Deborah gets an entire song. There's a song that's sung about Deborah. You see, sometimes our culture or sometimes our society says, no, you can't do something, especially to you all who happen to be women. Well, turn around and say, no, I can. God can speak through me. God can have me preach. God can have me lead armies. God can have me be the hero who knocks out the bad guy. When we realize that God is going to work through all of us, as the prophet Joel said, your sons and your daughters will dream dreams. Your old will see visions. God is going to speak through all of us. God is going to work through all of us. Take time today to lean in and to understand that God is at work through you. No matter who you are, no matter how you identify, God is at work through you. And once we all accept that, we'll be better together. Amen.